Hot Water History, episode 156, back on Wednesday night. Richied, what's going on?
I hit you with a big question earlier in the day. What's a greater disaster, the Francis Church or modern India or modern Indian culture and society? And you responded, India. But then after I pushed you a little bit, it might be a little bit closer than you think.
So, before having watched this video and the topic of today, I just would have assumed the Francis Church. I had no idea that India was this
This
big of
messed
a
up.
mess as it is.
Mm,
So, I would have just said Francis Church, the Francis Church.
yeah.
Turns out, India's kind of a wreck right
Yes.
now.
Right. And
And
has been for a few decades.
which I was completely unaware of. And I also didn't even know how many people there were in India. I would have, if you would have asked me, I would have said the stat that we're going to bring up in a little bit. I would have said it was 800 million total. I knew it was significantly larger than America, but I didn't know it was past a billion people. We're talking 1.6 billion people.
Yes, and as Jayant Bhandari in this clip that we're about to show from his speech on in from the Hans Hermann Hoppe Prosperity and Freedom Society talk and conference in Bodrum, Turkey, just took place in September of last year, September of 2024. He cites that statistic that 800 million Indians, which when we're talking about just the 800 million Indians that are on government grain programs so as to gain their daily sustenance. That number surpasses the entire population of North America and several other nations combined. So that's the type of demographic scope and size that we're speaking about when we're speaking of India.
Do you want to play the clip?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Over the last 33 years since I first left India, I have traveled to almost 100 countries and to many of them repeatedly. This, in my view, has given me a perspective on societies. India, which is what I'm here to talk about today, is the grandfather of the third world. The third world has 2 out of 3 human beings on the planet. 800 million people in India, which is equivalent to the combined population of North America and 27 nations of European Union, rely on free grains from the government. 1/3 of Indian children below the age of 5 are stunted. And that's an exaggerated figure in the sense that the number is actually much higher. A low single digit Indians might have the material resources. Even among them, I have never met one Indian who is not constantly plagued by concerns stemming from lack of trust. He cannot trust his family, he cannot trust his friends, he cannot trust the institutions. India is a veritable hellhole. I will explain how Indian culture has become cancerous, warping and perverting everything that the West has provided it. This has significant implications for the West because immigrants keep pouring in. I will, in my talk, outline the structure or lack thereof that renders life in India a constant drudgery filled with moment-to-moment exploitation and abuses.
The government grains statistic is pretty haunting that 800 people are live or die based off of if the government handout is there.
Yes, and it's one thing if 800 million people are in a system by which you have, at least to a degree or modicum, the government bureaucrats operating for the welfare or through at least a shred of altruism to provide people that grain, but instead, what Jayant Bhandari is describing is an extraordinarily sick, cancerous society in which, for example, I wrote down in some of my notes here, charity, and I mean the virtue of love, is viewed as a type of foolish transactional notion, and that the notion of doing work for those or providing for those who are destitute or in need is seen as a kind of forced work of the submissive to the superior. So, and that's what charity is understood as. It's a weakness. It is a foible, and almost a vice of foolishness. And he spoke of at the end that this is, and later in the talk, he speaks openly about how his home country and people is dominated by a culture of what he called, um, what I have here, apathy and amorality. Apathy and amorality are what are the central themes of Indian society and culture. And why this is so pertinent, as Giant spoke of in that clip that we played, is because the issue of not just H-1B visas, but Indian emigration to the Western world and the notion of whether true integration and assimilation could take place of Indians adopting and espousing Western values. Western values that Giant argues, Dr. Bhandari argues, were once inculcated into Indian society by the British as colonizers during the Age of Imperialism and Victorian era. He argues that these are principles and values that are in and of themselves are inherently good, but they're now absent within Indian society. I wrote some of the values that he mentions throughout the talk down. The notion of consent, merit, excellence, justice. There's no conception of what is truly due to people. Industry, that is to say, hard work is something that is viewed as, again, foolish. Rationality, trust. He depicts Indian society as a society that operates with a ubiquitous sense of distrust, and as such, disharmony results. Loyalty, honor. For example, later on in the talk, he has that mention, if you remember, Charlie, after you saw it, when if someone was called upon to do work within your home, for example, if you called a plumber, it would be seen as extraordinarily odd, an anomaly of sorts, if after doing the work, they did a complete job and didn't leave a mess behind.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no honor in industry and no sense of justice, even as a worker, if you're compensated. He also mentions how the supposed notion that we would have outside of Indian culture, that it's the caste system from the Brahmins down to the Dalits or the Untouchables and all the Shudras and the others in between in the caste system that creates this inequality. But in truth, he said that as vicious as the caste system is and degrading of one's humanity, in each caste, they fight like cats and dogs against one another so as to not be a part of the lower rankings within the caste. So he goes through it. He says, men abuse women, women abuse children, and the children learning these supposed values, or that there's an apathy toward justice and morality, an absence of morality in point of fact, they then go on to abuse animals. And he was shocked Dr. Bhandari, after living in the UK and working within Manchester for a year, how animals did not cower in fear when when he would approach them, whether they were pets on the street or in a zoo or something along those lines, because they were not fearful of humans just abusing them in a whimsical way,
Sure.
in a capricious way.
Yeah, they create their own caste system within a caste system almost.
Yes, yes, and it's a never-ending, radically inhumane restructuring and hierarchy. But it's not a hierarchy based on merit. It's a hierarchy based on identity and what one could provide another through connection and bribery and graft.
Right. It's all transactional, but it's not.
Mm. It's not right. It's not like a market transactional type of thing.
Right.
It's transactional, but you're seen as, and he goes into this, you're seen as being respected. The criminal is respected. The con man's not respected necessarily for his wit and ingenuity. He's respected to the level at which he's able to bilk the victim of whatever funds or favors are then not even solicited. Solicitation isn't something that is brought up. It's all about stealing, cheating, lying, dishonesty, dishonor. This was very eye-opening after I watched it.
It was eye-opening to me
While
as
I watched it
well,
too.
especially having really no idea that it was like this. And, we always complain about, we do our share of bitching about America and the
Mm.
government here, but
Mhm. Right. He goes on to say things that were, and he clearly pulls no punches in describing his native land and
a
culture.
hellhole.
He calls it a veritable hellhole. He says Indian society operates as a perpetual cycle. This is a quote, a perpetual cycle of irrationality and arbitrariness. He goes on to say that the that sadism is inherent within the culture and in quote immoral it is an immoral irrational society devoid of values. So talks of this nature from men who are clearly experienced, well educated, and have a truly global perspective, as Dr. Bhandari has, re- helps me or moves me to reevaluate whether it's as an anarcho-capitalist and looking back through that lens and perspective in history, or just simply as a historian trying to evaluate a trend within history that predominated entire centuries, like imperialism. It pushes me to as, imperialism is one of those, especially modern imperialism of the post-French Revolutionary variety, is always something that I struggle with in evaluating because from the perspective of an anarcho-capitalist, I like to draw a clear distinction of when market imperialism was operative, wherein you just had freedom of exchange and the especially elevation of the division of labor and also resources that would allow for this a growing, burgeoning, and ultimately beneficial to certainly the lower classes, but everyone throughout the world of resources and products and exchange that really improved and elevated the standard of living. Uh, so I'd like to make that easy contrast wherein the British East India Company operated in a truly market capitalistic way, and thus there was mutual benefit between Indians and Britons, and indeed the rest of the Western and proto-industrial world at the time. But and then though when the governments became so intensely involved, and I think that dynamic is truthful and it's helpful to understand that there's a dividing line when imperialism becomes a governmental and state project. There are many more abuses than when it's a market function, and with it, when imperialism of the latter variety, when the governments become intensely and innately involved, how that spurs on war and conflict, whether we're talking about the opium wars in China and the different campaigns against India and Native Africans, whatever it might be, all for the benefit of both the state and the corporate, industrial, and commercial interests that predominated, whether they be in British Parliament or the French Third Republic or the whatever the Bundesrat in Germany as the Germans got involved. But when we're talking about how divergent modern Indian society in this case has become and how it has abandoned the best of Western culture and society that was brought to it, whether that was forced upon them or whether and there are episodes I'm going to allude to one now regarding the British in India that Mark Stein in his book America Alone brought up about, and from his perspective, one of the great benefits in terms of human civilization, rights, and the like that the West brought to a place like India. It makes me recalibrate. You see,
Okay,
recalibrate and reconsider. So, do you mind if I read this episode about Suti?
go ahead.
Do you know what Suti is?
No, wait, hold on. Tell me, just don't waste my
Suti was
time.
the practice of in ancient, especially rural Indian societies and Hindi societies, the when a husband died, his wife would be thrown on the funeral pyre alive. So once the body was burned in a funeral pyre, the woman who was married or betrothed to that individual would be alive, thrown and forced into the fire, and of course perish. So he talks about this, Stein, in his chapter called The Falling Camel. The British in India were faced with the practice of suti, the tradition of burning widows on the funeral pyres of their husbands. And this is a famous episode that is often alluded to in justifying British, but more so just Western imperialism into the, as Dr. Bhandari mentions it, the third world. And it calls India the grandfather of the third world still. Sir Charles Napier, General Sir Charles Napier, was impeccably multicultural in this regard. He wrote to the various Hindi shamans who were practicing this practice of suti, in quote, "You say that it is your custom to burn widows. Very well. We also have a custom. When men burn women alive, we tie a rope around their necks and we hang them. Build your funeral pyre beside it. My carpenters will build a gallows. You may follow your custom, and we will follow ours." And he goes on to say, this is Mark Stein's commentary, India today is better off without suti. If you don't agree with that, if you think that's just dead white male Eurocentrism, fine. But I don't think you really do believe that. Non-judgmental multiculturalism is an obvious fraud and was subliminally accepted on that basis. After all, most adherents to the idea that all cultures are equal don't want to live in anything but an advanced Western society. Multiculturalism means your kid has to learn some wretched tribal dirge for the school holiday concert instead of getting to sing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or that your holistic masseuse teaches techniques developed from Native American spirituality, but not that you or anyone you care about should have to live in an African or Native American society. It's a quintessential piece of progressive humbug. So this gets back to the points that my favorite female comedian, it's a very short list, there's only one of them, Leonardo Joni, brought up in a variety of posts in reaction to Vivek and Elon Musk's advocacy and even Trump's advocacy for a continual emigration of supposedly tech bro, advanced tech educated Indians through the H-1B visa program. And that is they're needed to fill jobs in order to make America great again, make America the foremost technological power in that economic realm or in that economic and productive sector. And then Leonardo Joni quipped, I thought this was quite great. Well, why don't they stay in India and make India great again? In other words, is there not a latent, very greedy type of imperialism that is used to justify the emigration of capable Indians to do this type of labor? And the presumption, of course, is that Americans couldn't be trained to do such things or want such jobs if they were available. These are all good questions to pose.
Right. Where do you think it all stems from? Do you think it's just religion, the government, a mix of that, a mix of both?
Mm. Yes, I think a culture or a civilization. Well, I think you're touching upon something profoundly interesting, and that is we do tend to distinguish between cultures that are Christian or have a Christian ethic and emerge from Western society and have those principles that we deem as not just universal in terms of their goodness, but ultimately applicable to everyone. So the things that Dr. Bhandari said are absent within consent in India. Consent, merit, excellence, loyalty, honor, trust, faith, hope, love.
Did mention the Ten Commandments too.
Yeah, right. That there's no
And
cognition
how we just
of
take that for granted.
yes, and it's almost as though it's a given that's not even respected to any type of degree that it ought to be as an ordering principle for society. Gary North, the Protestant theologian thinker, has a great book upon how the Ten Commandments are the most brilliant, obviously divinely ordained, but originated, and the genesis of which is from God Himself, ways to, in fact, construct an operative society. In other words, the parameters are not just suggestions, they are essentials. And any society that does not possess them or see the tenets of the Ten Commandments as being instrumental for a just society to operate and function is wildly unjust and devolves into sadism and devolves into injustice and devolves into demonic activity. The question that you're, I think, moving toward is it's one thing to say that a culture is non-exposed to such values, such principles, such tenets and beliefs. But what about a culture that is exposed and then collectively elects to divorce themselves or distance themselves from them or see those values as non-essential, unimportant, non-necessities? Is that culture like in a post-colonial way, and like for example in India or in other places? See, what I think Dr. Bhandari is speaking of is India has a uniqueness to it in that with yes, limited but certainly focused prosperity coming to India in the last several decades. Well, and there's immense poverty, but there's also a buildup of wealth, especially in a very small class. And the wealth disparity is gigantic in India. Uh, when you have that type of growth in prosperity or seeming advancement, um, and then the people within the culture, the dominant ones within the culture, whether they be in government in the state or they be in whatever functional marketplace as entrepreneurs exists, when they elect to totally just trash and get rid of all of those formerly Western values that seem to be, well, beneficial to people and society's organization and functioning. Well, isn't that even worse than if they were never to have it at all? Sound like Lord Tennyson. It's better to
To have
have,
loved and lost.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's better to have loved Western culture. I would say, well, let's just reverse that. It's better perhaps never to have been exposed to Western culture and values than to have been exposed and then rid yourself of them.
Yeah.
Any other accounts that are parts of pieces of Dr. Bernardi's speech that hit you like a
It just reminded me of Michael Malice, how he
mm,
calls every country besides America a shithole, and
oh yeah, in the UK,
your shithole country. And
yes, yeah, and the accounts of radical injustice and complete indifference and apathy to human plight and suffering when lifting the proverbial pinky finger to help out is seen as being weak. Your compassion is seen as uh, a fault. I mean, when any society gets to that point where there's an immense lack of, or just a total absence of fairness,
that's the
justice,
worst.
and compassion,
That's the
it's done.
worst type of status too. The worst type of status is the fake tough guy
Mm,
with we're not going to help out. We don't need to do this. And then the same group that's getting the free handout from the free grain from the
yes.
government each week. That's the
Hmm.
worst type.
Yeah.
And they're gonna have to I don't know what's gonna happen to them, but
Yeah.
they're gonna have to figure
Well,
it out.
and we have to, demographically, especially because of China's one child policy, I forget where it is. If it's not taken place already, it's going to, in the next 5 to 10 years, that India will be the most populous nation on earth and surpass China. And demographics, as Mark Stein points out in America Alone, demographics is history. This is where Elon Musk, when he emphasizes the existential problem of the declining birth rates within Western countries and then within Westernized societies, from South Korea to Italy, is right in saying that you could just you could do a basic, very simple historical forecast of what countries are going to have more and more impact on the trajectory of history and development within human cultures and societies by, well, who's having the kids. For example, he cites in American Alone, he says, look, the Japanese and South Korean and Italian and Spanish birth rates have been operating well below replacement level for decades now. And ghost towns predominate in places like Spain and Portugal and Greece. And the South Korean population and the Japanese population are dying out. There won't be a Japan or South Korea in relative short order. And he makes the mention of in America Alone. Do you know that it was, I believe, in 2012 or maybe it was 2009 or 2009, there were more adult diapers sold in Japan than there were infant diapers. So that's a dying society.
Right.
So what country and culture is going to have greater influence in the decades that are going to evolve and come to pass? Is it going to be Japan or South Korea, Italy, Spain, with their declining birth rates and increasingly senile populations? and the fact that every childbearing woman of childbearing age is having 1.5 children on average, or is it going to be Yemen? Do you know what the Yemeni as late as 2010? We don't have statistics now because the Saudis have tried to wipe out the Yemenis as well as America and Israel through their genocidal war there, whether it's the Houthis or other Yemeni tribal groups. But the average Yemeni woman, you guess how many children the average Yemeni woman has?
3.
Seven.
Average.
Mm-hmm. 7.0.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Demographics is history. It's a good lesson to remember.
7?
Yes, seven. I believe that figure was from 2010. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any other thoughts on India?
No, I just never really want to go there.
No, me
Well,
neither.
I have to say too, I was saddened to, from Dr. Bhandari's perspective, hear that the Christians of India have been, perhaps because they're in a perpetual minority status, have been unable to effectuate and bring about a Christian culture, or at least insinuate and educate and instill some level of Christian culture. For example, the Indian province that where most Christians reside. In fact, they where Christians are a majority is Kerala. It's in the far southwestern tip of India, and it would seem to me that if Christian culture and for example, Syro-Malabar Eastern Church, obviously united with Rome, has the ability with its multitude of Catholics there to show how if if a Christian ethic, if a Christian morality predominates, where again, excellence in industry and justice and prudence, honor are seen as virtues, and that naturally has a redounding effect toward the benefit, prosperity, just general happiness and standard of living of people. Well, wouldn't non-Christians within India say, look what the Christians are doing down there or something like that? Let's imitate them. But it doesn't, it again, perhaps it's because the Christians are still a relative minority there.
Be like saying the libertarians are should make America more.
Well, but again, it's not as though the message of libertarianism, well, again, well, let's say anarcho-capitalism is so antithetical or contrary to Americans' values. Just have poor people or insufficient messaging, one could
Yeah.
argue.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say it has insufficient messaging as if everyone, if they were just to read a Hans Hermann Hoppe book, is going to become an ANCAP tomorrow. No, I don't think the values are aligned there. But would they be so revolted by a notion of 10,000 Liechtensteins or contractual relations and demonstrated preference and all the things that are essential to
Don't you think this?
understanding
Do you
anarcho-capitalism?
I guess I don't know what the state of Catholicism is like in that area of India, but do you think that
Mm.
there's a lot of state control with that?
Oh,
Wouldn't you just assume?
oh yes, of course. Yeah.
So,
And frankly though, I mean, the I forget his name, but the Cardinal Archbishop of Colombo in Sri Lanka, so neighboring state, former British colony, he he's kind of a hero now. He's the one that wrote a letter to all his priests saying, "No more altar girls. I've told you get rid of the altar girls. They're only to be boys." I'm doing the kind of Indian wagging the finger
did
thing,
he
but
do? Did he did that?
yes, he did, boss. And he said the very reason is because It is a stepping stone to
The
vocations, male
priesthood.
vocations,
Yep.
particularly to the diaconate and the priesthood, and therefore the practice of including women, which hasn't resulted in massive vocations to female religious life. Well, it's obvious that it's through their assistance at Mass in the vocation and the office of acolyte that boys are turning into seminarians and then becoming priests. And to include women or include girls in that is not advancing the church's mission. Yeah. Maybe he's Papabile. Could you imagine having a Tamil or Senegalese Pope? That'd be pretty wild.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
new.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about a town that also doesn't really respect the free market to a lesser degree?
Yes, well, Christian culture is also quite dead there.
That's true. Here it
Mm,
is.
boom.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Should go to your gay suburb now.
People segment. Meanwhile, in Oak Park. Starting in River Forest, more license plate reading cameras coming to River Forest.
The
Big Brother,
surveillance
Big
state.
Brother's always watching. Purchase will increase system to 37. Installation expected this month.
Oh God.
The River Forest Police Department will install 13 additional automated license plate reader ALPR cameras, expanding the crime fighting program to 37 fixed cameras throughout the village.
Oh, of course, it's for crime fighting. It's not for taking pictures of your license plate and then giving you a ticket without due process. But go ahead.
The village board at its December meeting voted 5-0 to authorize the purchase of the cameras from Minuteman Technologies of Tinley Park for $58,800.
They have unanimity in advancing totalitarianism. Good for you. Good for you, River Forest Village Board.
Trustee Ken Johnson did not attend. In a memo to Village Administrator Matt Walsh, Police Chief Jim O'Shea said Minutemen has been the sole source provider for the department for 7 years and continues to provide daily support and maintenance on their proprietary system. The purchase includes the camera's hardware installation and configuration, as well as the first year of annual licensing fees. The village will pay $500 per camera annually moving forward.
Huh.
So
Why, what is that for?
what is that?
Is that just for maintenance?
$40 a month per camera. Seems like a bad deal.
All to fight crime. What's the incentive there?
O'Shea said the new cameras have been ordered and that he expects installation in January, depending on the availability of equipment and weather condition. The license plates that are read by the cameras are compared to a database of wanted vehicles and alerts officers that a particular car is wanted for the commission of a crime, he explained. All license plate data is temporarily stored on a secure server.
Temporarily, yes. Uh,
In addition, investigators and officers can manually enter license plate information to more efficiently identify cars that are wanted for local crimes. All police patrol vehicles and in-station police computers can monitor the ALPR plate reads in the event of a hit on a stolen or wanted car or driver. I'd love to know how long the temporary
mm-hmm.
hold is on the license plate data.
It's only 70 years. Then,
Yeah.
yeah.
ALPR cameras were initially purchased in 2017 and 2019 and upgraded or replaced in 2024. In March 2024, 17 fixed cameras in the business districts were added or replaced. The 13 additional cameras will be placed in residential areas, primarily where there is traffic flow in and out of the village. O'Shea said staff members have monitored the effectiveness of the ALPR system for several years and determined that the system, quote, significantly improves the police department operational effectiveness and efficiency. The police department regularly detects and takes enforcement action on license plate hits for cars that are wanted for serious crimes within the village and throughout the metro area, he added.
No statistics to back that up, though. How many times it has been used to stop or apprehend carjackers or people who have stolen vehicles or remember the catalytic converter thing? Remember the hit rate on that?
Yeah. In addition to the 37 fixed ALPR cameras, 4 police department vehicles are outfitted with mobile ALPR camera. The department also is awaiting delivery of a mobile trailer that will include an ALPR camera. The mobile trailer purchase was approved by the village board in November, and delivery is expected in January. Well, how much did that cost?
Yeah, right. The mobile trailer.
To put where?
Yeah, it just goes around town. It's like a Winnebago that
Google
takes,
Earth?
yeah, yeah, it's a Winnebago that takes pictures of everybody's license plates without warrant.
Okay, that's story number one. This next one
Wow.
I'm pretty excited about because Richied,
Uh-huh.
I didn't know, and first of all, congratulations too for becoming the new public health director of Oak Park.
Whoa! Look at that handsome fella. Holy shit. Who is that?
Congrats, Gary Richied,
That
new public
that
health director.
wow. That's a good-looking fella.
Nice job. I didn't know.
Wow.
I know
Nice.
that it was tough. It was a long wait after Teresa Chapel Magruder stepped down. For those that are just listening, the new public health director
It's uncanny.
is not look like who you think it would look like. It does not look like
Oh,
Dr. Teresa Chapel Magruder. It actually looks just like Gary Richied. And this guy
holy cow.
Greg Olson, if that's even his real name.
That was an alias of mine. I
Yeah.
actually was yeah, in order to avoid the
Past the
crowds.
seven. What's code for past the seven, Richard? We haven't seen this guy and you in the same place at the same time. And
Nor
I don't
will
know
you.
if you've been going behind my back to fight COVID in Oak Park, but
Exactly. I'm throwing in the towel on hot water history. I'm just going to be the new public health director. Work from the inside.
Oak Park names new public health director, former Evanston. This was genius on your part to put they used to work at Evanston. Professional fills 6-month-long vacancy. Oak Park has named a public health director, Greg Olson, who has more than a decade of experience with Evanston's Health and Human Services Department. Just genius stuff. Olson, who assumed his new job on January 6th, fills a vacancy that had existed. This is hilarious. Filled a vacancy that had existed since Teresa Chapel, the former public health director, stepped down in July 2024. So it's been open
And
for 6 months and no one's noticed.
and
After
how
about
many scores of people died in between that time because they didn't have a public health director for the village of Oak Park, huh? I mean, how many deaths are attributable to the absence, the seat unfilled, until my doppelganger swooped in and decided to rescue everyone?
After about 3 years of the position, during the interim, Deputy Village Manager Lisa Shelley oversaw the public health department, which celebrated, oh, we did a piece on this, which celebrated its 75th anniversary in 2024.
50. They're celebrating anniversaries of useless bureaucratic offices.
The Oak
Uh,
Park Department of Public Health helps protect the community from preventable death, disease, illness, and injury, according to village officials.
and it was so crucial that we went without one for 7 months. Not a director of it.
Services include health assessments, education, prevention care, case management, and counseling.
Isn't it prevention care? Isn't it preventative care, not prevention care?
I don't know.
I'm caring about preventing stuff.
You guys are always changing these things. In a village news release, Olson said he is excited and honored to be chosen for the new position, and he's looking forward to tackling today's health challenges in Oak Park, which he called a quote progressive, diverse, and engaged community.
This guy is he's Bizarro
He
Gary.
sounds just like you, man.
He's
Quote,
Bizarro Gary. If only he was like black, like a black superhero. But otherwise, he is me. I mean, it's like looking in a mirror. It's freaky.
the goal of public health is to provide a community and environment which allows each individual the opportunity to achieve their full potential, Olson said in the release. collaboration, and partnerships throughout the community are an essential piece to improving community health and well-being. Olson had worked in Evanston's Health and Human Services Department since 2014. Since 2020, he was the public health manager in Evanston. According to the release, he oversaw environmental health programs, emergency response, and community health programs. He organized the $1.6 million department budget and grants. During that time, Olson was tasked with COVID-19 response efforts and oversaw Evanston's pandemic response, including contact tracing, vaccines, and local health metrics, according to the release. Quote, Oak Park will greatly benefit from Greg's depth of experience in public health and his understanding of the complex balance between science, policy, and the dynamic needs of our community. Village
Nowhere
manager,
nowhere in there the civil liberties of the people that live there.
No.
Go ahead.
Greg's expertise will further strengthen our commitment to maintaining Oak Park as a healthy and thriving environment for all residents and visitors. Olson also worked as a senior management analyst and senior environmental health practitioner in Evanston. He was part of the Evanston Health Advisory Committee and was secretary of the Illinois Environmental Health Association from 2015 to 2017. He's also worked at Lake County and Kane County Health Departments, according to the release, where he did food safety inspections, analyzed water samples, and resolved complaints. The new director earned a bachelor's degree in public health from Northern Illinois University in 2008. In 2018, he got a master's degree in public health from the University of Illinois Springfield, where he also got a certificate in epidemiology. Olson also graduated from the NEHA Environmental Health Leadership Academy in 2023. Olson is a member of the National Environmental Health Association and the Illinois Environmental Health Association.
And sure to have loads of Oak Park females chasing after him.
You got a lot of degrees, man.
Oh man, and all
I don't know
all
how
along-
how you have time to do all this studying.
It's amazing. Yeah. And the fact that I was able to lead this dual life, it should inspire everyone who wants to lead a dual life.
That's a segment, everyone.
Yep. Boom.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay? Everyone buy Tridentine Brewing.
Amen. Buy Tridentine Brew.
I haven't.
They haven't put out an IPA, an India Pale Ale. It's just not fitting.
That's. Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's been any new updates since the new year on the TV side.
No, but Trevor did like my tweet today that was ridiculing Kevin Warren, the president of the Chicago Bears. So yeah, I'll throw that up and link in the show notes so everyone can laugh at the risible ineptitude, the laughable ineptitude of a multi-billion-dollar NFL franchise in a very large metropolitan area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just outstanding.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everyone.
All right. Well,
God bless.
Yeah, New Delhi is not a destination you want to go to, apparently. So
No.
unless you want your ticket stolen from you on the way back. Until
All right,
and
well.
you want to abuse an animal with impunity. I don't know what else to say, but peace.
Take care, everyone.